Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Crispy, and I sense it's time for some Shiren the Wanderer, the Mystery Dungeon of Serpentcoil Island. Tips and Tricks, Part 1. Here we see the main menu. This keeps track of the stats of the current run, and your game can be suspended at any time, so that way you can pick up right where you left off. This menu will display those stats. Also, this adventure stat right here will keep track of how many total runs that you've had. For the purpose of this video, we will only be focusing on the basic adventure mode. Let's continue. Every run begins the same, where you start here at the beach village. Before you venture out, make sure you come down to this little cabin here, and this old man will give you some free food. Definitely a good thing to do before every run. If you ever see a red exclamation point, make sure you interact with it. These are events and are very important to interact with, as they will progress the story and also they will unlock things, such as hidden paths, dungeons, and just progressing the story in general. Let's begin the run proper by actually leaving the town. Here you get to see the main map. The map has a lot of information for you. Here's more red exclamation points letting you know that there are events coming up in those specific locations. You'll be able to see a lot of different things from the map menu. One of those things will be statistics in your adventure log. This gives you kind of a hint at how many different types of dungeons and paths there are in the game, and this will keep track of your numbers of completions in them and your attempts at them. Before entering an area, you'll be presented with this menu letting you know what dungeon you're in, how many floors there are in that dungeon, the average completion of that area for you previously and for everyone else. Let's talk about basic movement and combat in a mystery dungeon type game like this. Combat is turn-based, with each time you actually move causing an actual turn to occur. This also means that every time you move, anything on the floor is moving along with you somewhere, even off-screen. Different types of NPCs that you'll run into on your adventures, and in this case we ran into one pretty much you see on every first floor, where if you trade something with them, you have a chance of getting something else. This is why it's very important for you to grab the extra piece of food from the old man so that you can trade that immediately, and in this case we got a golden sword. Combat can become overwhelming in the very beginning, so you have to be careful, because it is very easy for a run to end. But if it does, don't worry, that's just part of the game. The other interesting mechanic in these types of games is whenever you move, you can gain health back as long as you're not being attacked. So here I'm demonstrating that by moving diagonal, the enemy is unable to attack me, therefore I'm gaining back some health. So then I can turn and face it and attack it, and just barely survive. On each floor, you will also find items all over the ground. Make sure you pick them up. Every item can be useful in a way, even if it is to just sell later on. Grab them and open your inventory to read what a lot of them will do. Some items won't give you an actual description on what they do unless you have an identify scroll. Don't worry if you don't have one of these, it's not the end of the world. There are little tricks you can use to guess what the item may be doing for you. The goal of each floor is to advance to the next one and to keep going as far as you can. What you're looking for is a little green square on the map, and that lets you know you can proceed to the next floor. There are many different types of enemies, and their color can sometimes indicate their strength. Also, sometimes an enemy will be asleep, and if you don't get too close to it, it won't wake up. We have found an identity scroll. Here, you can read it, and when you read it, you can click on something that doesn't have its identity revealed to you, and then in that case, you're able to identify it. After reading it, it reveals what it does. This is a synthesis pot. This is an incredibly rare and important pot that is unlocked a little bit later throughout the story. This is a very powerful and very rare item that will allow you to create a new weapon or shield combining the upgraded stats and runes of the 2 items that you placed inside the pot. This can be incredibly useful on any run and should be highly valued. Continuing on the topic of other pots, when you have one that's not identified, if you click on it and you can see that you cannot tap it, then that means it is a type of pot that you can put things in. Now, certain pots you can put things in, but you can't get anything out of unless you throw to break the pot. But you can check this as well by putting an item inside and seeing if you can peek and use the item with inside. If you can peek and use the item with inside, that means you can use it as extra storage to free up inventory spaces. This can be incredibly useful on long runs, as inventory management will become a very key point of the game. Another important use for pots is storing food. Keeping food inside pots will keep it safe so that it cannot become spoiled or damaged by an enemy's attack. This is incredibly useful and important, so make sure you're doing this often. While traversing a dungeon, make sure you're keeping an eye on your fullness meter. Your fullness meter is very important because if you go to 0, then every step you take will start taking damage. But a tip is that you want to kind of wait until this goes as low as possible based on what type of food you have, because it will maximize your abilities. On the topic of combat, if you ever see an enemy from far away but you don't want to advance him, then you can just attack in place to get him to come closer to you. This will allow you to always get the first hit if they come up to you. Also, when you see enemies at a distance, you can use ranged weapons to take them out. Rocks are actually incredibly strong in this game, so when you get multiple enemies in a line like this, it's a good idea to maybe just chuck some rocks at them. There also are a number of staffs in the game, and they can have some pretty good effects on them. Make sure you read them carefully and you can equip them to your ranged bar. Let's take a closer look at your main weapon now. Click the Equipment Details button, and here you can see a breakdown of what your weapon is capable of doing and if it has any runes inserted. Runes can give you buffs towards certain enemies or even resistances from certain status effects. There is also this special effect when a weapon is paired with its counter shield, so pay attention to this. It can become very powerful. Here we see one of the strongest scrolls in the entire game, and I will demonstrate how it is used right here. The Windblade Scroll will do a ton of damage to every monster in that actual room. Rooms are separated by passages, so when a scroll says it will affect anything in the room, it means just that specific room. But here's a demonstration of how to get yourself out of a little bit of a trouble if you're surrounded. Here's another NPC that is selling specifically only bracelets. Bracelets can be incredibly powerful, but they always come unidentified. A way to tell what might be a very powerful bracelet is just by looking at its value. The higher the value, the chances are the better the bracelet. Every 5 or so floors you'll encounter a new town or village. Sometimes in these places you'll encounter vendors where you can sell and buy new items, and also in this very first village you get to encounter the blacksmith. The blacksmith is incredibly important, so make sure you have at least 1,000 gold on you, because that's what it's required to upgrade either your sword or your shield, and this is the only time in your run that you'll be able to do this. After a certain story point, this gate back here will be opened up and you'll be able to enter a new dungeon. This will probably be the first actual new dungeon you encounter. This is the Secluded Path, and this can get a shortcut to advance in the main dungeon, but it also can be incredibly dangerous. This path contains different types of enemies that can be stronger, and also different room encounters. If you're feeling a bit underleveled, you can always run in place and it will advance time, but keep an eye on your fullness, as that will also shrink incredibly fast. But this will bring more enemies to you, and the enemies will keep spawning for quite a long time. There is an instance where the game will begin to yell at you and say, "And presence is coming for you because you've been on the floor for too long." Make sure you get out of there before this happens, though, or you will probably die. Often you'll encounter new weapons on your runs, and a lot of times you'll find ones later that will be a lot stronger. This sword right here happens to be one of the best ones in the game because it has a very high base damage, and not only that, but it also has a high accuracy. Accuracy is very important in this game because there are attacks that will actually just miss. So here I'm going to use that synthesis pot I got earlier in the run, and we combine it with our gold sword, and now we have created a rust-proof sword with higher accuracy. Taking the rust-proofness from the gold sword and the high accuracy from this one. But we also have made this sword, so now we want to try to find its shield, and as it said, that special effect, if we pair it with its specific shield, will make it have +3 attack and defense. Occasionally on certain floors you'll encounter this specific shop. This is a special type of shop where the vendors will have all their items laid out on the ground and you can read them, and if you pick them up and put them in your inventory, that means you have an intent on buying it. Anything that you want to sell while you're in the shop, you will actually place on the ground. Make sure that you actually remember to do this, because if you try to leave and not pay, then clearly you're surrounded by very many shopkeepers, and they're very powerful enemies. Not to mention that, and especially in this case, I'm surrounded by 4 of them. So I'm definitely going to pay to leave with the items I want. Because this dungeon is an alternate path, it has a blue staircase. This blue staircase indicates that you can leave the dungeon early if you wish. Also, I encountered a trap. There are traps all over the place in the dungeon, so be careful because a lot of them will have negative effects. Right here I demonstrate a very useful way to line up all the enemies trapped in a single file corridor. This can be a great way to make sure that you're not surrounded and you can do extra damage. Try to utilize these strategies when fighting to keep yourself alive longer. Here is a specific reason why this cave is actually an incredibly dangerous area. This is a very high valued enemy. This enemy's attack is so high that it will probably one-shot you, but it has basically no defense. So if you see it from a distance, just chuck a rock at it, and when you kill it, you get a ridiculous amount of XP. It's a great way to farm and level up faster. Some cave-like areas like this will have this blindness effect when you're in passageways, and this is another reason why this area can be very dangerous, especially if you run into that last enemy that can one-shot you, because you can't see anything in front of you when you're in the passageways. The only time it is lit up is when you're in an actual full room. At a certain point, a valued strategy might just be to head for the exit as quickly as possible. Once you get into the high teens, early 20s, maybe just actually get to the exit as quickly as possible. And then here you go, you've experienced a shortcut and completed a side dungeon. This is now the 3rd town, and in the 3rd town there is another type of vendor. This is the daily market vendor, and every time you come to them they will have a different item on sale, and it will only be that one type of item. But here you can kind of get a glimpse at some of the different types of shields in the game. And this is where it becomes very important, as I was saying before, to try to synergize with your weapon in order to get that bonus additional effect. And we do actually find the specific shield that goes with our sword, and we will get the bonus effect, as you'll see here. Each town seems to have its own connecting dungeon. This dungeon here is a ghost ship, and this ghost ship will not only provide us with a shortcut, but provide us with another new challenge of a side dungeon. on the ghost ship we're going to encounter something new. You see this purple speck right here? This is a behemoth gate. Behemoths are very large monsters, and basically they can only be defeated if you attack them from behind, but doing so can be quite a challenge in the first place. So generally, it's kind of recommended to just ignore them. They're really not worth the XP, but if you want to try to defeat one, go ahead. There is in-game achievements that will unlock wallpapers and skins, and one of the achievements is to defeat a behemoth, so maybe at least try to defeat one. This is one of the most important NPCs that you'll find in a dungeon. This is the carrier. This guy will deliver an item back to the beginning warehouse, therefore making it very useful to give him something to help you on the start of your next run. A very useful item to give him is a pot. Since he can only take back one item at a time, a pot counts as one item even though it can hold multiple. So put multiple items into a pot and then give it to the carrier to help you on your next run. There is a way to get a second chance on the same run, and it comes down to this one very important item right here called Revival Grass. Let me show you how it works. Especially when dealing with behemoth gates, you might find yourself in a dead-end room, and then all of a sudden the behemoth teleports into the same area as you, and now you're trapped. Well, you can try to outrun him because behemoths are a little bit slower, but sometimes this won't work. This could end a run right here, but luckily, when you have Revival Grass, when you're killed, you instantly revive. Finding multiple Revival Grasses would give you multiple chances. I've only ever found one per run though, so I'm not sure if that's a limit or not. At later stages in the game, make sure you pay attention to the average completion level to see if you're underleveled or not. This can be very helpful to know if you need to stop and power level a little bit on a floor or two. If you make it here to Hot Spring Cabin, you're about halfway up the entire mountain, and this is one of the only other places, or at least from as far as I've made it, where you can get your HP and strength back, but also it has an additional warehouse, so you can store items in this warehouse. Now, this is different from the beach warehouse, so whatever you leave here will only be at this specific warehouse. That's important to remember. But it could help you out in future runs if you make it back here and you maybe have a synthesis pot, or maybe you just don't have as good of a weapon as you left behind. As I talked about earlier, you can hit the adventure log and it will show you dungeons, the max amount of floors they have, and your attempts and completions on them. So now we actually had additional dungeons that we could view on there, and you can see there are a lot of hidden dungeons to find. Most which I believe are found through the red exclamation point events. So always make sure you're checking your maps for those red exclamation point events and seeking them out whenever you can. This isn't so much a tip, but just an extra game mode that is available in the game. This is called parallel play. Basically, at the beginning of any stage, you can create parallel data, and by doing so, it creates a save file. And this save file now is available to be shared with your friends. You can share the ID with your friends, with your community, and then they can go on the run from where you made that save point at. So now anybody that were to enter that code, as long as this code is up for the 9 remaining days, would be able to start with all the gear I currently have and at the health and fullness and level that I'm at. And then you can see if you can continue the run and beat the game from there. And maybe do better than me, because spoiler alert, I don't complete this run. If this code still happens to be available when you're watching this video and you try this and you beat the run, let me know in the comments down below how you did it, because I sure don't. And that leads us to the death screen. Yes, This is what happens when the run is over. It told you your total play time, your total monsters beaten, and your total turns moved, which is pretty entertaining. Your all level, all the money that you've earned, all these fun little stats. So it's a pretty cool little breakdown of what you just went through. Then it also goes over every enemy that you have unlocked in the monster index, which you can also click on, and you can see their actual total health and defense and weaknesses and everything. So it's a pretty useful resource. Pretty sure you can access this from the notebook from the main menu as well. This is what's considered the notebook. It's also telling you your completion of your side dungeons and all sorts of other fun stats. It's a really cool breakdown of everything that just happened. And then, as it always does, you start back at the beginning with absolutely nothing, and it's time to do it all over again. In some situations where you didn't encounter story events, it seems like you would be able to apply for a rescue, and other players would be able to rescue your save, and then you would be able to start over from where you died with all your stuff. You could also go and rescue yourself. It's a really cool online function of the game. I haven't been able to experience it much though, because I keep encountering story missions, and from what we can tell, if you encounter a story mission on your run, then you don't have access to be rescued. So that's the only downside there, but eventually we'll run out of rescues and we'll be able to do it. So pretty cool stuff. So hopefully this helped you out. Hopefully you're enjoying the game. If you haven't picked it up yet, it's available on Switch and PlayStation, and it is a fantastic roguelite. Lots of good times here. And also feel free to come check out my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit notifications. I'll be streaming this game very often. The plan right now is to stream it most Friday and Saturday evenings. So come check it out. And let me know how far you've made it and what your best run was in the comments down below. Hope to see you again, and until next time, always remember, stay crispy.